And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 136th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage of Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on April 7th, 2020, where I am your host, Matthew Lukens, and here with me tonight are Indiana HQ contributors Nithin Christian and Andrew Rude. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all I have to do is search the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts, stay up to date with all of our information following us on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound, as well as our partner and our favorites at Indiana HQ. Head over onto our website, indianahq.com, for everything in one quick place. All right, Hoosier Nation, it's time for some sports talk. Well, there hasn't been much sports lately, so we're going to have to start looking forward to next season. So with the 2019-2020 season for basketball over, I'm going to start off by kicking it over to Nithin about football season, which is the next season that's coming up. So, Nithin, quick overall thoughts on what you're excited about for this upcoming football season.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Right now we would normally be talking about spring practices and the spring football game, and we'd see Michael Penix and see his development physically and see him fire shots down the field to guys like Whop Phillier and Ty Freifogel. But, unfortunately, none of that's happening because of COVID-19. So we still thought it would be a great time. Yeah, we still thought it would be a great time to sort of hit the reset button, take a step back, and just fill all of you listening tonight and the rest of the week on the different changes that have happened to this team since we saw them, believe it or not, over 3 months ago in the Gator Bowl. So 8-5 last year, and now we're looking ahead to the 2020 season, assuming we're just FYI, we're assuming the season's going to happen. So right. Don't at us.
Right. There's a lot of stuff. This is obviously a fluid situation with the coronavirus and everything that's going on. I don't think I need to be the first person to tell you how crazy our lives have gotten over the last couple of weeks. Anyways, so yes, you mentioned Peyton Ramsey, right? That's going to be one of the biggest stories of the offseason. We lost a 2.5-year starter at IU. Somebody came off the bench last year for an injured Michael Penix and led us to our best record since the 90s. So that being said, Andrew, welcome to the podcast again this week. What are you looking for out of Penix to replace Ramsey, and what is going to be your lasting thoughts on Ramsey as a quarterback for IU?
Well, guys, thanks for having me back on. It's good to be back for 2 weeks in a row. Hope everybody's staying safe out there with everything that's going on. The Ramsey news, I was kind of just – it wasn't really shocking, but it's something that we knew could have happened. And, yes, I'm pretty much saying he was a 3-year starter at IU. He went in – for Lego, then Penix came along. Everybody thought Penix was going to be the big deal, but then Penix got hurt, obviously, in 2 seasons. So, realistically, him transferring, he wants to be a starter somewhere else. Everybody knows that Penix is going to be the starter. So, the IU is going to have to find that leadership that Ramsey brought in, guy coming off the bench, knowing he wasn't going to be the starter and leading the team to a bowl game berth. So that's the biggest thing I think that Penix needs to show up and bring in his leadership qualities right away, because it's his team. Tom Allen has said that time and again that it is Penix's team, and he's got to step up to the plate this season. He's shown that he can do it with his arm. Now he hasn't shown that he has not shown that he's not been able to stay healthy. So that's going to be the biggest question and the things he needs to answer to everybody, because he's got the potential to lead IU next season to a really good season. But it's all going to start with the biggest question of all is, can you stay healthy?
Absolutely. Yeah, Penix needs to stay healthy if we're going to have a successful season next year. We'll talk a little bit more about backup quarterback situation later when we highlight some players we're looking forward to seeing in the upcoming classes. Anyways, I think Andrew hit the nail on the head when we talk about Ramsey. I think production and the play out of the quarterback spot is going to be better with Penix in there. What we're going to be missing on the squad is the leadership Ramsey brought as what Andrew said, as basically a 3-year starter at IU, and was, a quote unquote from Tom Allen, leader of the locker room last year. So Nithin, looks like you got something to talk about on this. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. No, and to me, like, we can't. I mean, Indiana football has closed the book on Peyton Ramsey. He's off to Northwestern now, but like, I think it's important to take a step back and realize how good he was. Like, as a quarterback, he had 56 touchdowns in 3 years. Okay. I mean, just for reference sake, I think Antoine Randall had like 67 or 68 in 3 years. Okay. Yeah. And no one's saying Ramsey is Antoine Randall, but like, to think that he was 70% of that, that's really impressive. And of course, now he's off to another Big Ten team. And if you guys haven't heard, Northwestern does not play Indiana in 2020. So it's not like he's transferring to a Big Ten school that plays the Hoosiers. Interestingly enough, Coy Cronk, who transferred to Iowa, the Hawkeyes also don't play the Hoosiers. So it's funny how both of these guys, even though they're transferring to Big Ten schools, they're not going to play Indiana in their 1 year outside of Bloomington. But, overall with Ramsey, and it wasn't just the fact that he put up numbers. He was pretty impressive in big moments. I mean, to me, the one I remember most was that last regular season game he played at Indiana against Purdue at Ross-Ade Stadium in a nasty weather day. And he still put up something like 400, 450 and like 5 touchdowns or something, including the big ones, the big one to win the bucket itself. So the bucket's going to be in Bloomington for another year. A lot of the leadership and the lessons that Ramsey taught to the other players on the team, they're going to be there again. It's just he was really good. And I don't think he's just going to be an afterthought for Indiana. Michael Penix has big shoes to fill, as weird as that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, we're losing a guy that threw for almost 2,500 yards through the air, a 68% completion percentage. Now, I would be alarmed if we were losing that guy and didn't have somebody replace him like Penix, who had a 68.8% completion percentage last year. But so both those guys had 2 of the highest completion percentages in college football, behind somebody named Joe Burrow, who might be going number 1 overall in the draft. These guys are extremely accurate quarterbacks that we have or had in our arsenal. We're losing Peyton, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and he was a pretty good runner of the ball as well. He could get first down with his legs, even a couple touchdowns with his legs. So we're definitely going to be missing Peyton for the depth perspective, but as far as the output on the field and our starters, we wish Peyton the best of luck in Northwestern, and we hope to see him in the championship game in Indy next year. In the Big Ten.
I have one thing to add on that. Talking about Ramsey and Penix, the way they played, I think one thing that Penix coming in next season is going to have, I think, a upper hand is going to be playing in big moments. When you look at him coming in last year against Michigan State, the game where no one thought he was going to start, but then he got the reps during warmups, went in and led IU to an almost victory, which they honestly should have won that game the way they played, I thought. And then you look at Ramsey in big games. I mean, Nithin, you talk about Purdue game. That game was really good on the whole team's part, honestly, the way they fought and won that game. There were just some times, and critics were talking about it, just not being able to live up in the big moments. And for instance, the Ohio State game this past season, Ramsey looked very under pressure. Not mean like he was under pressure in the pocket, everything. He just looked very confused and didn't play up to the potential of the team was wanting that game. And that was the entire team loss. I think it's just Penix taking another step next season is going to have to be in those big game situations, because Ramsey did show it in some parts last season. But if Tom Allen really wants his team to take another level and break through next season, win the bowl game, you have to have your quarterback play the best he can in those biggest moments of the season.
For sure. I totally agree. Yeah, with that Michigan State game should have been a win, and I'm really excited to see what Penix becomes next year, but we'll talk about Penix a little bit more later in the podcast. So, Nithin, who won this week in IU sports? I think it's a pretty easy answer, but go ahead and fill in the viewers.
Right. So once again, it's interesting because there's not much going on, and not much going on the court or on the field. Maybe that's a little hint. There was big breaking news earlier today for Indiana basketball fans and for the Indiana basketball team. 4-star big man Logan Dunscombe from Cincinnati, from Archbishop Miller High School, he committed to the Hoosiers. He's a top 100 player according to 24/7 Sports. He had offers from teams like Ohio State and Wisconsin. And, I'm wondering what you guys think. He's a 2021 player, so he's not going to come in for another year and a half or so. But immediately to my mind, I'm thinking Joey Brunk replacement. Is that how you guys see Dunscombe, or do you think his ceiling is even higher?
Oh, I think his ceiling is even higher. When I look at Logan, he has skill all over the floor. He's not just an athletic big man that can run rim to rim, but he's also a guy that has shown glimpses of being able to spread the floor and be able to shoot an outside shot, maybe even shoot a three-pointer in college. I think he mentioned on Inside the Halls article today that that's one of the things that the IU staff highlighted for him to work on, was getting an outside shot and working inside out, having that inside out game as a big. So I could definitely see him as somebody who's going to be a really good pair alongside somebody like if Trey stays a third year, which I don't think is very possible, or somebody like, and I'm just guessing here because he got some crystal ball predictions today for IU, but somebody like Trey Kaufman from Sellersburg, he would fit really well against somebody like that at the 4 position. So I think he has a higher ceiling than Joey Brunk has. Is he going to be better than Joey when he comes in immediately? Probably not, but he's probably going to fit better than Joey, and he's a little bit more athletic than Joey. So we're not going to be seeing him getting caught on hedging the ball screen as often as Joey was in his IU tenure. How about you, Andrew? Any thoughts?
I'm still undecided because I've not had a chance to watch him yet. And partially my fault, but it was announced today. People, come on. It's just going to add more depth to the IU roster, and especially in the front court area, because Duran's leaving this year. Joey Brunk has another year with the team. So Archie Miller is getting ready to find those next guys to step up. And it's really interesting that I think what's really going to help that front court depth is bringing in guys that can play the ball screens, be versatile on both sides of the floor athletically, so that way IU can really use that to enforce their will on teams going forward.
For sure. Versatility is something that we've been complaining about all season in basketball as far as a couple players on this IU roster. So having anybody that can come in and help with that is a plus.
Yeah, and with Dunscombe, this is a guy who's 6'9", 235. Indiana's front court has some availability to it in a couple of years' time. So you're thinking, like you said, Matt, Trace Jackson-Davis probably out the door, Joey Brunk. I mean, really right now you're looking at Race Thompson and Jerome Hunter, because remember, Justin Smith, he's graduating also after the 2020-21 season. So definitely some opportunity for a kid like Dunscombe, who once again, top 100 player, multiple teams. It's very possible that he gets a chance to step in right away and contribute, even if it's in a measured role.
There's plenty of guards out there in the high school recruiting world and all that. So I think really going after front court players, especially with the departures they're going to be having soon, is really going to help them. And I give Archie a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, for sure. Recruiting seems to be going in a really nice direction for basketball. I'm really excited to see things where things land. Wow, that was hard to say. Okay, so on to coaching changes. So the second biggest thing that happened this offseason was we lost a couple of head coaches and some equipment guys and some strength coaches, and you name it, we lost people. So we got people poached. So the departures, off the top of my head, from IU's football program, we lost our strength coach to Alabama. We lost our offensive coordinator in DeBoard to Fresno State to be a head coach. Guys, who am I missing off the top of my head right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when you win 8 games at Indiana, right, people have you've got a target on your back. So Mark Hagan, defensive line coach, he went to Texas. Because of that, Kane Womack got promoted to full-time defensive coordinator. Not sharing the role anymore. I wasn't sure. I kind of had some technical difficulties there for a second, but Nick Sheridan's now the offensive coordinator. He's replacing Kalen DeBoer. So Sheridan in-house, he was the tight ends guy. Now he's strictly offensive coordinator. And I was, and so those are primarily the main coaching changes. We talked Kevin Peoples, the new defensive line coach, Aaron Wellman, the strength guy. He came over from the Giants, which is a big time hire for Indiana football. But let's start with the offensive coordinator move, because Indiana's got a lot of really important returning pieces to the offense. I mean, Penix at quarterback, Stevie Scott at running back, as well as Samson James there. Whop Phillier and Ty Freifogel at receiver. And you can even include guys like Miles Marshall or David Ellis, who are going to have a bigger role next year. The tight ends room is going to be pretty deep next season, even with Peyton Hendershot having some off-the-field issues in the offseason. The offensive line is going to go through a little bit of turnover, but bottom line, Indiana, whether it's Tom Allen or Fred Glass, they said, hey, let's keep this in-house. Let's not go bring in someone else from who knows where and relearn a whole brand new – none of that. Nick Sheridan, he's been at IU, I believe, for 7 years. This is somebody who isn't going to change the jargon too much. It may have been a little underwhelming, but you get why they did it. And so I'm expecting Indiana's offense to just keep it smooth, keep it rolling. I don't expect too much of a different learning curve here or anything. I don't expect too many pages, new pages added to the playbook or anything like that. No. So that's the way I see it. Focusing on the offensive coordinator, Andrew, I mean, what do you know about Nick Sheridan? How do you think Indiana's offense is going to do in the season to come?
Yeah, realistically, when we were prepping for this and we talked about all the changes and everything, it just blew my mind how IU was really in the spotlight now, coming off their really good season they just had. All these coaching changes going everywhere. I mean, Nick Saban got into his bag of tricks and grabbed some staff from Indiana. So that's huge as it is going to coach for Nick Saban. Looking at the offensive coordinator position, I like what Nithin said. I like how it's still in-house. Nick Sheridan coming in. I think what's really going to help is staying in-house is the chemistry, because you don't necessarily have to put in an entirely brand new system. It sounds like the system is going to be similar. And the way college football is going is a lot of people are running the same stuff because the game is changing. So realistically, it's just going to be getting the players to continue that trust in and belief in that system. It sounds like Tom Allen, once again, is all in on everything he does. So I think, and especially with the quarterback situation with Penix, is hopefully going to be healthy for an entire season, can really use him and his weapons to really put the focal point on the IU offense that is going to be attacking down the field. Whether it's through the air or those guys, or using the backfield of Stevie Scott, Samson James.
Yeah, I'm just glad they didn't bring back Mike DeBoard. Remember him from a couple of years ago? I saw them. No.
I think Indiana fans want to forget about Mike DeBoard. So.
sorry, didn't mean to. Bring you guys some sweaty palms. I think I heard Michigan hired him as an analyst or something. So like that. I'm not sure how that's going to work for them, but. One thing I know, Matt, is you were excited about Kevin Wright, who was hired as the tight ends coach. He came over from IMG Academy. I mean, we saw last year Indiana's tight ends were a pretty crucial part of the offense. What can you tell the listeners about Kevin Wright, just as a football coach and maybe even more importantly as a recruiter?
Right. Yeah. So Kevin Wright is a huge addition to the staff, not only because of his knowledge of the tight end position and on offense, but because of what he brings as a recruiter, as Nithin just mentioned. Wright was a coach at IMG Academy in Florida. Now, you might know IMG because IMG is an agency. They work a lot in football and baseball. They're big baseball agents, but they also have a charter school in Florida that trains athletes, and especially student athletes, to get them to the next level. It's like a magnet school down in the Orlando area. So a lot of the best athletes, especially in football and basketball, go there. I know they have like 4 or 5 current 5-stars in this year's class that are a part of the IMG Academy football team that he was the head coach of. So he was coaching a possibly more talented football team than IU was down in Florida, as far as recruiting rankings goes. So that's something to look out for. He's also a former Indiana football coach. He was a high school football coach. He coached at Warren Central and Carmel, I believe, high school. So, and look, those are some of the best programs in the state of Indiana historically, not just recently for football. So this is a guy that has recruiting stamps all over the country and a program that is an IMG that is probably the best high school football program in the country. And then in Indiana with the two best, being a former coach there. And this is a guy that's going to have connections all over the country thanks to his connections through IMG. So this is going to take IU's recruiting, especially when it comes to tight ends and wide receivers and anything he really wants to focus on, up another notch. And that's what Coach Wright is going to bring. Nithin?
Yeah, his dad, fun fact, his dad, Bud Wright, is the winningest coach in Indiana high school football history. And he's active. He's an active coach. He's in his 53rd year at Sheridan High School. So I don't know. I don't expect Kevin Wright to be here for 53 years. But if he is, I guess that would be a really good hire. Also, I think he'd be like 114 years old. But
yeah, he'd be a little old. But I think there'd be other reasons why I'd be surprised he was there. Andrew, any thoughts on Coach Wright?
You guys have touched on the majority of it. I think it's going to be a great hire. When I was at the introductory press conference with him before one of the basketball games, one thing that spoke to me right away is that he's all in already. He gets a lot of that energy from Tom Allen, and it sounds like that this was a really good hire, and it's going to benefit them in every way. Matt, you touched on the recruiting. Just bringing somebody in who wants to see IU succeed in the level that they are playing.
And to me, I mean, so that's Kevin Wright, and we talked about Nick Sheridan as the new OC at Indiana. To me, one of the biggest developments for IU football is after the great season they had last year, two key assistants remained on the staff, and that's running backs coach Mike Hart and wide receivers coach Grant Hurd. And these are two guys that have been in Power 5 college football for a while. And, you know, you've seen with the depth that Indiana has at running back and at wide receiver how important those two coaches are. Once again, Mike Hart and Grant Hurd. I bet you big time top 10, top 15 schools gave them a phone call. But they stuck with Tom Allen, and they stuck at Indiana. So, Matt, what I'm curious to hear from you is, I mean, am I overselling this? I feel like having those two assistants still on the staff is a big deal for IU.
I think you're underselling it. I think it highlights the ceiling and the excitement within the program for next season, right? These guys could have gone to, I'm sure, coach. Our running backs coach, whose name is slipping my mind, Hart. Mike Hart. Yep. Mike Hart could have walked in the door at Michigan and they would offer him a job, whatever he wanted to. Again, he's a former Michigan running back, and the success he's had at IU developing NFL caliber running backs. I mean, look, we just had one in the Super Bowl in Tevin Coleman, right? So look, he has a track record of developing guys into NFL talent at the running back position, and being a former Michigan running back, he could walk in the door and get a job. Our wide receivers coach could go to any program. I mean, like, there was rumors, I remember this summer, there's rumors of him getting calls from Auburn and a bunch of other huge SEC programs that, look, they get to pick whoever they want. These guys, they pay the most, they play the best games, they get the best talent, you know, they're on the best TV networks. They're not on Big Ten Network at 12 p.m. Every day or every Saturday. So, look, the fact that these guys stayed with us is a real big deal, because that means they're excited and want to work with our guys that we already have, and they think that they can improve their careers by staying at IU. Yeah. And that's a huge testament to what not only Tom Allen has done, but what Fred Glass has done to this program from when he took over as athletic director until now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because Scott Dolson, who's going to be the new athletic director taking over before the start of the next school year, I don't expect him to change too much. Another in-house person, he's going to share a lot of the same vision for the football program as Fred Glass did. But we were talking about Grant Hurd. he came from Ole Miss, okay? And Ole Miss a few years ago, they beat Alabama a couple of times. I mean, they were a real powerhouse SEC football program. They've slumped off a little bit recently, but when he was at Ole Miss, he recruited and got guys like AJ Brown and DK Metcalf to commit to Ole Miss. And I mean, he was the responsible party as far as recruiting those two players. And when you look at Indiana now, I mean, Whop Phillier is going to be in the discussion for one of the best receivers in the Big Ten this year. Having Grant Hurd on board is a really big deal. And I have a fun story. I was at fall practice last year. I wish we could have had spring practice this year, but you know, both of these guys, Mike Hart and Grant Hurd, they're not just going through the motions when they're coaching. Coach Hurd is one of the most vocal guys you're going to see on the practice field. And it goes from the established starters like Nick Westbrook was or Donovan Hale was last year, all the way down to the first year true freshman players. Every practice, I would see him pull over young receivers, especially one guy, Jordan Jakes, who's a freshman that could play a bigger role this coming season. And it was just constant teaching. And it was, hey, you've got to be on this spot, on this route, on this time. And that stuff makes a difference. And that's the type of stuff that gets Indiana from 5 wins to the 8 wins we saw last year.
For sure. Andrew, anything to add?
Not really. Just researching more about Hurd. 4th season, first as a co-offensive coordinator. So there's something special about IU. I really think there is with Tom Allen at the helm. The way he's able to bring in the recruits lately, keeping the core coaches around him. Yes, you lose guys like Kalen DeBoer and the coaches they lost this season. They're also bringing in some really good ones. Yes, when a team has success, that's going to open up the eyes to a lot of people. Kalen DeBoer definitely deserves that head coaching job at Fresno State, what he did for IU's offense.
Yeah.
So some fans may not like a lot of changes in a program, but it shows that this program's going in a positive direction under the helm of Tom Allen.
For sure. I don't think anybody would disagree with you, especially coming off an 8-win season in a bowl game in January against Tennessee. Okay, so moving on to my social media shout out. So a coach that we didn't talk about in coaching changes, we talked about the strength staff going to Alabama. So now our new strength coach is Aaron Wellman. So now Aaron Wellman was the former strength coach for the New York Football Giants, like the NFL team. And we hired him straight from the NFL and came down to college football to work at IU. He got a couple shout outs this week on Twitter from the likes of Brandon Marshall, former NFL wide receiver, and this guy named Odell Beckham Jr., who you might have heard of before. He's like a pretty good wide receiver in the NFL and has done a bunch of things like, his crazy one-handed catches and such. He was also looking to have a big year for the Cleveland Browns. Anyways, Aaron Wellman, shout out to Aaron Wellman. He's, if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's IU Coach Wellman, and that's WELLMAN on Twitter if you want to find him out. And then if you want to follow us, look up Indiana HQ on Twitter and Instagram, and then look the Hoosier Sound on Twitter to follow us to get all your updates for the podcast. So moving on, we got coaching changes. We got Ramsey leaving. So we're going to talk about some positive stuff and some newcomers. Right? We got a lot of new people coming in to the football program now, and a couple people that we're really excited for. So I'm going to list them off one by one, and I'm going to have the guys discuss them. So the first guy is Shawn Williams. He is a wide receiver coming in. He's a 4-star. He was offered by LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State. Those are some pretty good programs. He's from Michigan. So, Andrew, starting it off with Shawn Williams, what are we looking for from Shawn?
Yeah, I think starting off with Shawn Williams, it's a huge gift for IU, hands down. One of the biggest gets in a while. And real fast, is my internet connection running slow? I'm having some issues.
No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay, so back to Shawn. He's got the potential, I think, to start right away, not necessarily be the main point of the offense. You obviously have Walt Villier and everything, and Ty Freifogel. So probably going to be that third, fourth guy on in the formation for the Hoosiers and whatnot. And big things about him is his very physical, strong athleticism. It's really going to help give Penix that extra option, because a lot of teams this year, they're probably going to be keying in on Walt Villier because the big season he had last year. So now Williams, this gives Penix an extra weapon of the high caliber that Penix has to throw to. So that's going to help exponentially getting this offense down the field.
Yeah, and in 2020, okay, football's no longer a game where you just have two receivers. Okay, it's not like you got one guy to the left, you got one guy to the right. I mean, you see teams consistently trot out 3 receiver, 4 receiver, even 5 receiver sets. And when Indiana does that, remember, Nick Westbrook and Donovan Hill graduated. Shawn Williams is going to be part of that. And we actually interviewed him on an episode of the Hoosier Sound a few months ago. I'd highly recommend those of you listening to go and try to find that, because a lot of the stuff we talked about still stands. And you would think, right, a player from Michigan, why wouldn't he just go to Michigan or Michigan State? Well, first of all, he wouldn't want to go to Michigan State now because of the coaching change. But a big reason for what a big thing he told us was he just wanted to set his own legacy. I mean, set his own story. If you go to Michigan and if you have 1,200 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, not many people are going to remember you in 10, 15, 20, 30 years. People are going to remember players like Walt Villier at Indiana because of the big numbers he's putting up and getting Indiana to 8 wins like he did last year. Shawn Williams wants to follow in this footsteps, and he's one of the most active people on social media, by the way, when you see as far as trying to get other guys to come to Bloomington. It's really good to see. And once again, we talked about Grant Hurd's influence. That's where you see it, not just on the field, but off the field as well in recruiting. So I don't expect too many incoming true freshmen to make a big impact for IU in the upcoming season. I think Shawn Williams is going to be one of the select few.
Yeah, I do believe that Rashawn's going to be probably one of the most productive newcomers, and hint, we might be talking about that a little bit later on in the podcast. So moving on from Rashawn, we're going to move to Demarzi Lewis. So Demarzi is from Florida. He's a defensive lineman. He was offered by Florida State, Auburn, Tennessee, Miami, and Penn State. Those were some real big blue bloods as far as college football goes. So Nithin, what is the lowdown on Demarzi Lewis?
I think that'd be a good nickname for him, lowdown, because I mean he's big, defensive tackle, the kind of guy that Tom Allen, he's talked about it time and time again. He loves depth, especially in the trenches. You talked that Demarzi Lewis had, so that's really exciting. Tom Allen singled out Lewis during one of his media sessions a while back. He said this is a guy he's really excited about, and he didn't say that about every single true freshman. I know you might think, okay, the head coach probably is complimenting his kid, but no. I mean, he singled out Lewis as a really exciting prospect for IU football in the years to come. That defensive line has some really interesting pieces. DeMarcus Elliott's going to be returning in the coming season. Javon Swan transferred over from Stanford. This is a pretty solid interior, defensive line in general, and that's exciting for IU football.
Yeah, having a D-line is very important. I mean, look at some of the best teams in the country. They're always up there with the best defensive lines. That's just how it works. It's football, folks. You got to get to the quarterback. So moving on from Demarzi, hopefully he contributes his freshman year. Move on to Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell is a former high school All-American kicker, was the number 1 kicker in the country at one point during his recruitment, and redshirted last year, and he'll be the kicker taking over starting this year. I know he's one of Nithin's personal favorites, so I'll kick it on over to Nithin. So what do you got on Charlie Campbell?
I see what you did there. You said you kick it on over to me. Look, Logan Justice was a pretty reliable guy for IU last year and a couple years ago. Campbell, he's a right-footed guy. He converted a couple of kicks last year in some pretty tricky conditions. He actually pinch kicked for Justice in the Purdue game, which feels like years ago. But in that Purdue game in West Lafayette, where it was cold and it was rainy and it was windy, he came in and knocked in a 40-something yarder. And remember, that game went into overtime. So certainly Campbell's a player who's going to help, make that transition from Logan Justice a lot smoother. And Justice was a really good kicker. I mean, he's trying his hardest to get into the NFL right now. Campbell is someone who Indiana fans, I think, will grow to like in the seasons to come.
Yeah, I feel safe knowing that he's going to be our kicker. And he even got some game time, like you said, against Purdue last year. So moving on, we got a couple new additions on the offensive line. I know Andrew is dying to talk about this. So Charlie O'Connor, he'll be a redshirt sophomore. So yes, while he had his freshman season last year, he didn't play much. And Dylan Powell, who's a transfer from Stanford. So you want to give us the lowdown on the offensive line for next year, Andrew?
Man, the offensive line, as you both know, that's my specialty. I love the offensive line. I obviously played that. Indiana's offensive line, entering the offseason, I thought it was going to have a lot of questions because you lose 3 starters and Coy Cronk, who didn't play majority of last season due to injury, Stepanek, and also Littlejohn. So losing the 3 players like that, Stepanek and Littlejohn had 59 combined starts. And then you also talk about the leadership of Cronk. So that's huge. Losing those guys that can be very deflating to any offensive line. But they're bringing in a lot of depth for next season. You have, obviously, we're talking about Charlie O'Connor right now. Young, redshirt sophomore, young guy, appeared in 4 games at center. So he has the potential to take that center spot next year, depending on what's going to happen. But another big name that Indiana fans need to know is, pulling up my notes, is Dylan Powell, obviously, the transfer from Stanford. 6'3", 300 pounds. Missed 2019 due to injury. In 2018, he was a 3-time starter, played 11 games at guard and center. So really versatile, playing guard and center. That's huge for any offensive lineman. Realistically, you want to be able to play every position in case somebody goes down. So those 2 guys are really going to be able to add depth to that offensive line. And when you're looking at the offensive line, you have on the spring roster right now, you have 7 freshmen, 4 sophomores, 4 juniors, 2 seniors, and the grad student Powell. Okay, coming back, you have Bedford, Jones, and Kreider. Those are the 3 guys, majority of the snaps last season. So I have my potential 2020 IU offensive line starters, and I have left tackle Matthew Bedford, guard I have Kreider. Yep. At my center I have Powell getting that start at center.
Transfer from Stanford.
It's going to be interesting because depending on where he's at based off his injury from last season and how he fits into IU system.
Yeah.
Caleb Jones, the returner at right tackle, really excited to see what he's going to bring next season. Was a starter all year last year. Yep. I thought he got a lot better as the season got on. Got really better as mobility, I think, protecting for Penix's blind side. And then the offensive line did a lot of transitions and swapping him over whenever Ramsey would be in, etc. And then at my guard, I have McKenzie, trying to get this right, Nora. Yeah, trying to get his name right. Played in 8 games, 2019, 3 starts at right guard. As a freshman, he started 6 times and played 10 games at right guard. So there's going to be a lot of depth, I think, next season. It's going to be young depth, but it is depth nonetheless. Guys playing multiple positions. It's going to be interesting how Kreider, Powell, O'Connor as well, getting all those guys repped in, see who's going to be the starting 5 week 1.
Yeah, it's good to know that we have depth, though, and we definitely got that this year, especially after what happened last year and losing 2 starters to injury.
Yeah.
So
fun little note. Oops.
Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so fun little note, right? It would be Harry Kreider and Caleb Jones, 2 starters, 2 probable starters, both from the state of Indiana. So Coy Cronk, West Lafayette guy, he's now off to Iowa, but you just slide Harry Kreider right in there, and you've got more in-state recruits starting on that line.
Man, IU's just killing it with in-state recruits recently. So quick last notes on the last couple guys here that we'll run through very quickly. Dexter Williams is a dual threat quarterback. He's offered by Navy, FAU, and Western Kentucky. He's a 3-star recruit. Nithin, quick thoughts on Dexter Williams?
Well, and again, don't overlook that Navy offer, right? When that school comes after you as a dual threat quarterback, they run the triple option over there, or at least some sort of option offense. That means, a player like Williams is able to handle a lot of responsibility. Of course, right now he's buried on the depth chart a little bit behind Penix, behind Jack Tuttle. If a couple years down the road, 2-3 years down the road, who knows what happens? Williams should be ready to fill right in case of emergency, so to say. But for now, just keep an eye out for him. I think spring practice would have been really fun to watch him take part in that, because he did enroll early at Indiana. In fact, he won the Scholar Athlete of the Month just this past month. So, very interesting player. I don't expect us to see him on the field for another couple years outside of some sort of mop-up duty.
For sure. Hopefully we don't. All right. So then, look, Andre Brown and Khalil Bryant left. We got some holes in the secondary next to the one and only Taiwan Mullen. So Larry Tracy is somebody you might see in that position. He's a redshirt freshman cornerback. Andrew, quick thoughts on Larry Tracy?
Thoughts on Larry Tracy? Anytime you bring in guys for the secondary, it's always going to be huge. I don't know I'm unsure how often he's going to play to start. He's already he redshirted the 2019 season, played at Eastern Illinois, who IU beat last year, enrolled in spring classes, and he's participated in practice so far. At 5'11", 181 pounds, obviously size, let's be honest, size doesn't matter in football when you look at Taiwan Mullen, the way he played last season. So bringing a guy like Tracy in, hopefully it can bring more depth and security to the secondary.
Yep.
Because there were times last season IU was tested, and if you have say Taiwan Mullen, Reese Taylor, somebody goes down, you got to have somebody who can step up.
For sure. Like the Warriors say, strength in numbers. Okay, so we're going to move on. Quick last segment before we finish up the podcast. It's going to be our personal favorites and personal picks for the upcoming season. So we're going to each pick one starter we're excited for, one breakout candidate, and one newcomer that will make the biggest impact. So starting off first is our one and only favorite co-host, Nithin Christian. So Nithin, pick one starter you're excited for, one breakout candidate, and one newcomer.
Yeah, so it's funny. A lot of people know about Mike Penix, and he's going to be a really important contributor to this team next year. There's no doubt, as somebody who averages almost over 8 yards per attempt from last year, he's going to make a big difference. But if you want to look at a sort of underrated guy to look out for, right? Because the most casual IU football fan could tell you, oh, Mike Penix is going to be great.
Right. One
person I have my eyes on is James Head. He's a defensive end. He played a lot for IU last year as a freshman. He plays a big role on the defensive line because he's Indiana's number one pass rusher as far as the defensive line pass rush is concerned. And last year he had, let me just pull this up to be safe. Yeah. So last year he had 2.5 sacks on the season, which doesn't pop out on the surface, but he had some pretty big games against some pretty tough teams. Okay. I remember last year against Penn State on the road, he sack stripped Sean Clifford and got a big turnover for Indiana in Penn State territory. So Head's a guy, he's number 6. At least he was last year. I'm not sure if he's going to keep the same number going into next season, but he's a defensive end. Keep an eye out for him. I think he's going to be a really interesting piece. Now, do you guys want to give your returning starters also that you're looking out for, or should I go into how do you want it? Should I go into the breakout or the freshmen?
Just go in. We'll just list ours off real fast.
All right. So James Head's the guy I'm expecting to be a really emerging starter. As far as breakout players go, we touched on him a minute ago. It's Charlie Campbell, the kicker. I know, right? The kicker. Sure. Yeah. Laugh all you want. But we saw time and time again last season, not just for Indiana football, but for a lot of other teams. Once you get into conference play, all these games are decided really by a possession here or there, 3, 6, 7, 8 points. Kicking makes a difference. And And for Indiana to be able to transition smoothly from Logan Justice over to Charlie Campbell, I think that's a pretty big deal. So as far as newcomers I'm excited for, Charlie Campbell's the guy you're going to have to look out for and be excited about. As far as freshmen are concerned, for me, the guy I'm kind of curious about, and again, Shawn Williams is kind of the headliner, but I'm going to actually look on the defensive side. And we talked about Demarzi Lewis a little bit earlier. That to me is somebody who's going to make a pretty big difference for IU. And I don't know exactly how many snaps he's going to get. I can't tell the future. But when Tom Allen singles you out, and then you look at the types of schools that recruited him, it always helps to have a little bit of beef on your defensive line. And I think that's what Demarzi Lewis will give Indiana in 2020.
Sure. So those are Nithin's picks. I'll go my picks really quick. Mine are going to be a little bit wide receiver heavy, but oh well. So as far as starters returning, we talked about Penix. We haven't talked about Whop Philliard yet, though. So Whop is going to be a guy that obviously is going to be key to our season next year. Look, our leading receiver, 70 receptions, 18 more than the next guy up, which is Peyton Hendershot, another guy that's going to be big coming in next year. But over 1,000 yards receiving. Look, I can't stress enough how important Whop is going to be. Not only he might not have the production he had this year, he might not have another 1,000-yard receiving, but the fact that he's going to be doubled almost every single game and getting the other wide receivers that we have are talented guys, and Ty Freifogel and Miles Marshall and David Ellis. And we'll talk about another guy, Shawn Williams, in a minute during this segment. But to get those guys less coverage is going to be really helpful for their careers as well. So look out for Watt. As far as breakout candidate, I'm going to go to the defensive line. Again, we talked about James Head. I'm going to go with Sio Nofo Gakatoa. I think I just butchered that last name. I decided to pick the hardest name to pronounce. But no, Sio seriously is a monster, like in the weight room, like an absolute monster. They're always showing videos of him breaking some sort of bench press record or whatnot. And was just on Twitter conversing with Tom Allen about his former rugby skills. So look out for Sio on the line.
I'm pretty sure it's Sio.
Sio?
To talk about that. That's the easy part of the name.
I'm fired. Oh man. Well, anyways, Sio is somebody to look out for, not only just because his last name's awesome, but because he's legit going to be a workhorse for the defensive line in the coming years. And then finally, I alluded to it earlier, but Shawn Williams is going to be my breakout candidate. It's the easiest one. It's the obvious one, and I'm cherry picking, and I don't care. He's going to be one of the most important players we have on offense next year as a third or fourth receiver, as a freshman. So obviously, as far as the newcomers go, he is going to be up there on the list. So lastly, we got Andrew Rude. So Andrew, your three candidates for this category.
Well, first of all, I think, Matt, you need to look at your IU football pronunciation guides so we can get names right on this podcast. Come on, people. Let's get it together. Looking at my players for the upcoming season, one name I'm surprised none of you guys talked about yet is Samson James, my most excited starter for next season. So everybody knows the news that it was rumors about him transferring, and then he came back, withdrew his name from the transfer portal. So that was very big for IU because that depth was going to be limited if Samson James decided to go find another place to play. So looking at him for next season, I really think he's got the potential to compete with Stevie Scott for the starting job. And when you look at how talented Samson James is and all his accolades, played in all 13 games last season with the 2 starts near the end of the season, 4-star recruit, decommitted from Ohio State, come to Indiana. That was the very big gift for IU. Now, transitioning into next season, I really think he's going to step up his play to another level. He's got the year in underneath his belt. Hopefully he doesn't go into a sophomore slump and it can really show off his capability to lead IU next season, because Stevie Scott takes a lot of hits when he's running the ball downhill like he does, and he's good at doing it. It's just going to depend on if they both can stay healthy.
Yeah.
IU's offense is going to be really good next season. So I'm really excited to see the transition for Samson James from year 1 to year 2. Keeping going on the offensive side, my breakthrough player is Ty Freifogel. And I was very hesitant on picking my breakthrough player, but then I looked at Freifogel. We talked about so far on this podcast the IU receiving depth for next season with Whop Failure, Freifogel, Shawn Williams. And I touched on it with Penix that he's going to need more guys to throw to. And Freifogel shown he can play with what he did last season, entering 2020 with 75 receptions and 998 yards. So he can really take a step up next season and be that extra weapon for Michael Penix. That offense is going to do really well because it takes the pressure off Whop Failure not having to do so much, and it also boosts Freifogel as if he's catching the ball from Penix on a regular basis, it's going to get him really going. So that way, that offense can really thrive.
Yes, sir. And then the last one.
So we talked about the offensive line. My newcomer was Dylan Powell, just because of the depth that's going to add to that offensive line, like we touched on earlier. I'm just really excited to see the offensive trend that IU's going through. I really think it's going to be a really good one. You don't have all the leadership there that, say, Ramsey or Corey Cronk had, but you have guys who have played. Tom Allen said at the end of the Michigan State game last year that they're the third youngest team in the Big Ten. Okay. Times have changed now. You're going to the next season. Yes, you still have a lot of young guys coming in, but you have these freshmen, sophomores, juniors who are now the leaders on this team. And it's really time to show what Tom Allen's been preaching, what LEO is all about, and breaking through to where IU wants to be in this league.
Yeah, and I think that leads perfectly into my closing thoughts, which is, look, we were the third youngest team in the league last year, and we had 8 wins. Like, what does that mean for next year and the year after that and the year after that? Look, the blueprint and the projection and the trajectory of IU football from last year and to this year and then to next season, the season after that, is up, and it's constantly going up, whether it's in recruiting rankings or it's in Pro Football Focus preseason draft projections for our players, or we're looking at preseason rankings in ESPN. We're getting shout outs in top 25s. Like, this is something that is just uncharted waters for IU. And it's something that we should just take in and look at and just cherish while we have it, because let's all remember the not so long ago, those years where we were having 2 or 3 wins with Tevin Coleman as our running back. Can you imagine like this coaching staff having Tevin Coleman with these weapons that we have on offense, right? So this is something to look forward to. Any last thoughts, Andrew, as far as closing thoughts on this team?
Yeah, as we're sitting here just giving our thoughts on IU football going on, and we obviously don't know what's going to happen. Spring football is canceled. I was looking forward to covering that. Fall, it sounds like it's still going on. We've not gotten an official word, so keeping it in your minds that we're probably still going to be playing a football season. Big thing for IU going into next season is I really don't think you can have a drop off. Like, I'm pretty sure the expectation is now you're going to get to another bowl game. It's going to be a consistent expectation going forward, and if they have a potential 5-7 season, 4-8, depending on if something happens. It's Indiana football, Matt. Don't look at me like that. anything can happen. So you just can't have a drop off if you're Tom Allen in this program, because it's going to set everything back that you've built towards with recruiting, bringing in coaches, having a really good season, and to see all that go down the drain in just one rough season. That can't happen. They have to show how they're going to battle through adversity. They're playing at Ohio State next season.
Yep.
They're playing at Michigan next season, at Wisconsin, the first game of the season. Okay, it's a very it's going to be a very difficult schedule because where they have to go play away from Bloomington. So they just have to be ready to handle that adversity and take that next step to where a lot of people see this program going. They just can't have that drop off.
Totally agreed with that. And it's funny, I saw some tweets from some national football analysts that said, hey, if Indiana stays healthy, don't be surprised if they go on like as a really deep, underdog for that Big Ten title. Can we say that in hushed tone? Yeah. But anyway, my two closing thoughts. Real quick, shout out to both Dylan Powell and Javon Swan. They transferred from Stanford, and I'm a proud Kelly student, and the Kelly school got them both to come there as part of their MBA program. So that's pretty exciting. But the other thing, we sent out a poll a couple hours ago before our show on the Hoosier Sound Twitter account, and definitely recommend following that account at the Hoosier Sound once again, just for updates and for episodes. We'll let you know when to listen to us. But it's a simple question. Other than Michael Penix, which returning IU football starter is the most important for the team next year? And it was really close. I mean, this is one of the most interesting polls I've seen on Twitter. A lot of times you see, 90% or 80% for one of the options. Whop Fillier won the poll. And you can still vote, by the way. It's going to be up until tomorrow evening. So you can actually influence it. You can change how these results end up. As of our recording, as of our recording on Tuesday night, Whop Fillier won with 37%. Stevie Scott, the returning starter running back, had 32%. Tywan Mullen had 30%. 1% said other. I thought some of the responses were pretty interesting. Joel said it's got to be Whop, but Mullen as a cornerstone of the defense is huge as long as he wants to wear the cream and crimson. Yeah. Dino is pretty straightforward. He just said O-line. He said O-line is the most important. I know Andrew can respect that answer. And then Sophia Hoosier just said the correct answer is yes, and that's probably a fair summary of all of it. Both all three guys, Whop, Tywan Mullen, and Stevie Scott are going to be important. But again, that poll is going to be up until tomorrow evening. It already has almost 200 votes. Definitely curious to see how things end up tomorrow night. We'll definitely send out the final results when they happen.
For sure. And the story of IU's next season is in that Big Ten championship possibility, right? Like if we're in the discussion for it, right, come November, like look at how far the program has grown under Tom Allen. And I think the story of IU football in general is summed up perfectly in one hallway in IU. So right outside the football locker room, I was a tour guide for IU. Right outside the football locker room, they have posters of all the bowl games that IU's been in the fields. They take a picture of them from the shot from above. And they have a picture of IU at the Big Ten Championship and at the Rose Bowl. Well, if you know anything about IU football, we have not been to the Big Ten Championship and we have not been to the Rose Bowl. So it's an obvious photoshopped picture that's sitting there on the wall. I would like for that not to be a Photoshop picture very soon. And the fact that we're even talking about IU football having a chance to even have a non-Photoshop picture on the wall is incredible. And we're incredibly lucky to be alive at a time like this. Anyways, that about wraps it up for our 136th episode of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You guys are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic interviews like the one you heard today, and more of fantastic podcasts like the one you heard today, visit at the Hoosier Sound at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any of our stuff in the future. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourselves. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.